You think walking away is weakness? You think silence makes you look small, desperate, defeated. But what if I told you that the moment you stop texting her, the moment your name disappears from her notifications, the moment your attention goes dark, that's when her mind starts screaming. Because nothing haunts a woman more than a man who stops chasing her. Welcome back to Female Code Unlocked, where we decode the unspoken rules of female psychology, attraction, and emotional power. If you want to understand what really goes on inside her mind, not the fairy tale version, but the raw psychological truth, subscribe now and step into the knowledge most men never learn. Let's talk about silence. Not the angry, dramatic silence. Not the, I'm trying to manipulate you, silence. I'm talking about the calm, controlled, emotionally detached silence that says, I no longer need your validation. You see, when you were texting her first every day, when you were always available, when your attention was predictable, you became safe. And safe feels good, but it doesn't trigger urgency. Humans don't chase what they feel certain about. They chase what they fear losing. The moment you cut her off, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect, something subtle shifts inside her. At first, she feels relief. Finally, she tells herself, no pressure, no expectations. But then a strange thing happens. Hours pass, then a day, then two. Your absence begins to echo. She checks her phone, not because she cares deeply yet, but because she's confused. Why haven't you texted? Did something happen? Is he upset? Or worse, did he move on? And that question, did he move on, is where regret begins to grow. Because women are emotionally wired to measure their value through attention and emotional connection. When you were giving her consistent energy, you were feeding a subtle sense of security. When you remove that energy, her brain goes into loss mode. Psychologically, humans react stronger to loss than to gain. It's called loss aversion. We feel the pain of losing something twice as intensely as the pleasure of gaining it. So when you disappear, she doesn't just miss you. She experiences a psychological withdrawal. Think about it. If you've ever had someone who always liked your posts suddenly stop, if someone who always checked on you suddenly went quiet, you don't shrug it off. You feel it. You feel the absence like a missing piece in your daily rhythm. Now imagine this from her perspective. You were the one validating her stories. You were the one flirting with her casually. You were the one who made her feel desired without demanding commitment. And then, you're gone. No explanation. No emotional outburst. No, why are you doing this to me? Just silence. And that silence is powerful because it communicates something words never could. I know my worth. Women regret losing men who stop needing them because most men never stop. Most men double text. They ask for closure. They try to fix things. When you don't, you become different, and different creates intrigue. Now she starts replaying conversations. Was I too distant? Did I push him away? He seemed genuine. Regret doesn't hit instantly. It creeps in at night, when distractions fade. She might post more stories. She might subtly try to trigger your attention. She might even test you with a random text days later. But here's the part most men misunderstand. Silence only triggers regret if it's backed by authenticity. If you cut her off just to get a reaction, she'll feel the manipulation. But if you genuinely detach, if you focus on your purpose, if your energy shifts because you truly decided she's not your priority anymore, that's when her ego feels it. Because now she senses she's not in control. And when a woman realizes she lost influence over a man she once had wrapped in attention, that's when the regret becomes massive. Not because she necessarily loved you, but because she lost the certainty of you. And certainty is addictive. The truth is, you don't create regret by arguing. You don't create regret by proving your value with speeches. You create regret by becoming unavailable to someone who assumed you always would be. And the most dangerous part? She won't always admit it. She might act cold. She might pretend she doesn't care. But internally, she feels the shift. And that shift unsettles her. Because now, the power dynamic changed. And she didn't expect you to have the strength to do that. You think the silence ends the story. But it doesn't. It begins the psychological war inside her mind. The first few days after you disappear, she distracts herself. Friends, work, social media, maybe even another guy. She tells herself, it's not a big deal. But silence has a way of amplifying thoughts. At night, when the noise fades and the room gets quiet, your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. She remembers the way you listened without trying to impress her. She remembers how available you were, and suddenly realizes how rare that actually is. Because here's what most men don't understand. Attention feels abundant until it's gone. When you were texting her every morning, she could take her time replying. When you were initiating every plan, she could decide when she felt like showing up. When you were emotionally invested, she didn't have to question your interest. But now she's the one wondering. And uncertainty is uncomfortable. You see, attraction isn't just about chemistry, it's about emotional contrast. When you remove yourself calmly, without anger, without drama, you create contrast. You go from predictable to unpredictable, from guaranteed to scarce. And scarcity changes perception. Think about luxury brands. They don't beg customers. They don't chase attention. They create distance. And that distance increases perceived value. When you stop chasing, you subconsciously reposition yourself. Not as an option, but as a man who has options. That's when her ego starts to react. Because if she felt she had you emotionally secured, if she felt she could respond whenever she wanted without consequence, your withdrawal feels like a subtle rejection. And rejection triggers reflection. She starts analyzing her own behavior. Maybe I was too distant. Maybe I didn't appreciate him. He was actually different. Notice something powerful here. You didn't argue her into valuing you. You didn't convince her. You let absence do the talking. And silence is louder than any paragraph you could have sent. But here's where it gets even deeper. When a woman feels she might have lost a man who genuinely cared, two emotions collide inside her: curiosity and fear. Curiosity, because she wants to know what changed. Fear, because she might have miscalculated your worth. And women rarely regret the men who chase them endlessly. They regret the men who quietly step away and never look back. Because now she can't measure your interest. She can't control the pace. She can't predict your next move. You've removed her emotional leverage. And that loss of control? It unsettles her more than you realize. You might start noticing subtle signs. She watches your stories quickly. She posts things she knows would trigger your reaction. She might send a casual, almost innocent text. Hey, how have you been? It won't sound emotional. It won't sound dramatic. But behind that simple message is a question she won't say out loud. Do I still have access to you? And this is where most men ruin everything. They jump back instantly. They reply within seconds. They over-explain their silence. And in that moment, all the psychological power you built through absence collapses. Because your silence only works if it reflects a real shift in your mindset. You're not playing a game. You're evolving. You're choosing peace over pursuit, standards over attachment, self-respect over validation. When she senses that your energy genuinely changed, that you're not waiting around hoping she'll choose you. That's when the regret deepens. Because now she's not competing with another woman. She's competing with your indifference. And indifference is terrifying when someone once had your full attention. But here's the truth most people won't tell you. Cutting her off doesn't guarantee she'll come back. It guarantees something more important. It restores your power. It reminds you that your value doesn't depend on her response. And ironically, that emotional independence is what makes her feel the loss the most. Because women don't regret losing control over boys. They regret losing access to men who outgrew them quietly. And if you stay disciplined, if you resist the urge to break silence just because you miss her, if you continue building your life without looking back, her regret transforms from curiosity into realization. Now tell me, are you strong enough to let your silence speak longer than your emotions? Now it gets deeper, because the real regret doesn't start when she misses your texts. It starts when she feels your emotional shift. There's a difference between a man who is silent and a man who has detached. One is waiting, the other is gone. And women can feel that difference instinctively. At first, she might think you're just taking space. Maybe you're busy. Maybe you're upset. But when days turn into weeks, and your energy doesn't reach for her, and you don't react to her subtle attempts to pull you back in, that's when something inside her drops. Because now she realizes you didn't just stop texting, you stopped needing her. And that realization hits deeper than rejection ever could. You see, when you were emotionally available, she had leverage. She could be inconsistent. She could delay replies. She could give you just enough attention to keep you around. But once you detach, the dynamic flips. Now she's the one unsure. Now she's the one questioning. Now she's the one wondering if she misjudged your value. And here's the psychological twist most men never understand. Women don't always regret losing you because of love. They regret losing you because of comparison. At some point, she will talk to someone new, and he won't listen like you did. He won't understand her moods the way you did. He won't validate her in that subtle, steady way you did. And suddenly, your memory sharpens. The things she once overlooked become rare. The consistency she took for granted becomes expensive. And that's when regret matures. Because now it's not emotional impulse. It's realization. She might scroll through old messages. She might reread conversations where you showed patience. She might replay moments where you showed emotional strength instead of ego. And here's what will sting her the most. You never begged. You never collapsed. You never tried to force her to stay. You simply withdrew with dignity. That kind of exit is unforgettable because it leaves no villain, no dramatic story to tell her friends, just a quiet awareness that she lost someone who genuinely valued her and chose himself when she didn't choose him fully. And that choice, that self-respect, is magnetic in hindsight. Now, imagine this scenario. Weeks later, she finally reaches out. Not emotionally, not dramatically, just something simple. I was thinking about you. And in that moment, you have two paths. You can respond with the same eager energy you once had. Or you can respond as the man who evolved. Calm, centered, unattached. Because the real power of silence isn't about punishing her. It's about transforming yourself. When you cut her off and truly move forward, you're not hoping she regrets it. You're building a life where her regret doesn't define your worth. And paradoxically, that's when she feels it the most, because she senses you're no longer orbiting her world. You're creating your own. And here's the final truth most men struggle to accept. Sometimes her regret will come too late. Sometimes she'll realize your value after you've emotionally outgrown her. And that's not tragic. That's growth. Silence doesn't just trigger regret in her. It reveals strength in you. It tests your discipline. It exposes your attachment. It forces you to confront whether you truly value yourself or just the attention she gave you. So ask yourself this honestly. If she never came back, if she never sent that hey text, if she moved on completely, would your silence still be worth it? If the answer is yes, then you've already won. Because the moment you choose self-respect over chasing, the moment you choose purpose over pleading, you stop being just another option. You become unforgettable. And unforgettable men are always regretted, not because they demanded love, but because they walked away before they had to beg for it. And here's the part no one romanticizes. Silence is painful. You don't just cut her off and suddenly feel powerful. You'll miss her. You'll think about texting her at 1 a.m. You'll open her profile and close it again. There will be moments when your ego whispers, just reach out, just say something, end this tension. But growth lives in that tension. Because every time you resist breaking your silence for temporary relief, you reinforce something inside yourself. I am not driven by impulse. I am driven by standards. And standards are rare. Most men operate from fear of loss. You're learning to operate from acceptance of it. That shift changes everything. Now let's talk about the final layer of regret, the one she'll never admit. At some point, she'll realize that you weren't just another guy chasing her. You were someone who genuinely saw her. You understood her moods. You picked up on subtle shifts in her tone. You gave emotional presence without suffocating her. And she'll compare that to the attention she gets now. Surface-level compliments, temporary excitement, men who want her but don't truly understand her. And quietly, she'll think of you. Not dramatically, not obsessively, but in moments. When a song plays, when she's alone in her room, when someone else disappoints her in the exact way you never did. That's when regret becomes real. Not because she can't have you, but because she knows she mishandled you. And here's the irony. By the time she fully understands your value, you might not feel the same anymore. Because silence didn't just create space between you and her. It created clarity within you. You started seeing the imbalance. You started noticing how often you initiated, how often you overextended, how often you settled for crumbs. And once a man sees that clearly, he can't unsee it. So even if she comes back softer, sweeter, more available, you won't be responding from hunger. You'll be responding from choice. And that is the ultimate power shift. Because now you're not trying to win her back. You're evaluating whether she still qualifies for your energy. That's what silence does. It turns you from the pursuer into the selector. And women feel that shift instinctively. They sense when a man's attention is no longer guaranteed. They sense when admiration turns into discernment. And nothing triggers deeper regret than realizing you lost access to a man who no longer needs to prove himself. So understand this clearly. Cutting her off is not about revenge. It's not about teaching her a lesson. It's not about playing emotional chess. It's about refusing to invest where you're not valued. It's about walking away before resentment turns you bitter. It's about protecting your peace. And if she regrets losing you, that's a byproduct, not the mission. The mission is becoming the kind of man who can walk away calmly, who can sit in silence without collapsing, who can feel desire without being controlled by it. Because once you master that, you don't just trigger regret in women, you command respect from yourself. And that is far more powerful than any text she could ever send. If this opened your eyes, stay with us. Because the more you understand female psychology, the less you'll chase, and the more you'll naturally attract. This is Female Code Unlocked. And now you know why silence isn't weakness. It's leverage.